Little Women is an American novel by author Louisa May Alcott, published in two parts in 1868 and 1869. The novel narrates the story of four sisters from childhood to womanhood and is roughly based on the life of Alcott and her three sisters. The story kicks off with Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy lamenting their poverty ahead of Christmas. They are planning to buy presents for themselves but change their plan and buy presents for their mother, Marmee. The mother comes home and gives them a letter from Mr. March, the girl's father, who is serving as a Union chaplain in the Civil War. After reading the letter, the kids cheer up and forget their poverty. On Christmas morning, the girls wake up to a pleasant surprise as they find books, probably copies of the Pilgrim's Progress, under their pillows. Marmee urges the kids to give away their breakfast to a poor family, the Hummels. Their act of kindness is rewarded by Mr. Lawrence, an elderly neighbor, who sends over a feast to the March sisters. The girls are completely surprised as they have never met him. Meg's wealthy friend, Sally Gardiner, invites Meg and Jo to attend a New Year's party at her home. At the party, Jo meets Laurie, a boy who lives with Mr. Lawrence. Meg sprains her ankle while dancing, and Laurie drops the sisters back home. After the festivities are over, the March girls regret returning to their daily routine. Jo goes to see Laurie, who is sick, and meets his grandfather, Mr. Lawrence. Unknowingly, she derides a painting by the old man in front of him, but Mr. Lawrence admires Jo's spunk and they become good friends. Mr. Lawrence is acquainted with all the four sisters, but he finds Beth the most interesting. He even gives her his deceased granddaughter's piano. The March girls have a busy life, but they find time for various adventures. At school, Amy is caught trading limes, a popular pastime among school-going children, and the teacher hits her as punishment. Mrs. March gets very angry at this and withdraws her daughter from the school. Sometime later, Jo refuses to take Amy along with her to the theater, and in anger Amy burns Jo's manuscript. In return, Jo nearly lets Amy drown while skating on thin ice. Pretty Meg attends her friend Annie Moffat's party, where her friends dress her up in high style. She realizes that appearances are not everything. At the party, Meg gets the feeling that people think she wants to marry Laurie for his money. A few months later, the Marches come up with an idea of forming the Pickwick Club, in which they write a family newspaper. In one of the club's meetings, Jo introduces Laurie as a member of the club, who presents the club with a postbox. In the summer of June, the Marches neglect their housework. Marmee, too, takes a day off during one of the lazy weeks. The March girls spoil dinner, but everyone takes it lightly. They also enjoy a picnic with Laurie and his English friends. Later, Jo gets a story published for the first time. Then, a telegram from Washington, D.C. informs the March family that Mr. March is sick in the hospital. Marmee wants to go and take care of him, so Jo sells her hair to finance the trip. Once the mother leaves, the girls neglect their housework and chaos reigns at home. Only Beth is sincere as she visits the Hummels, but after coming in contact with the Hummels' baby, she contracts scarlet fever. Beth is about to die until Marmee returns home and helps her recover a bit. In order to escape the disease, Amy shifts to Aunt March's house for the time being. Mr. Brooke, Laurie's tutor, falls in love with Meg, but Jo does not approve of this relationship. However, Mr. Brooke and Meg are engaged at the end of Part 1. The Part 2 of the novel picks up the story 3 years later. Mr. March is back home from the war and Laurie is about to finish his school. Soon, Meg marries and starts living with Mr. Brooke. Amy invites her art school classmates over for lunch, but poor weather ruins the party. Jo has a novel ready but needs to cut it down to please her publishers. After marriage, Meg finds it difficult to manage the household. Soon, she gives birth to twins, Demi and Daisy. Amy accompanies Aunt Carol to Paris instead of Jo, who was looking forward to the trip. Aunt Carol chose Amy as her companion because of his ladylike behavior. Jo starts thinking that Beth loves Laurie, and in order to give a chance to Beth to win Laurie's affections, Jo moves to New York. There she meets Professor Bear, a poor German language instructor, who discourages Jo from writing sensationalist stories. Jo takes his advice and goes for a simpler writing style. When Jo returns home, Laurie proposes to her, but she turns him down. In the meantime, Beth dies. Amy and Laurie reunite in France and fall in love with each other. Soon, they get married and return home. Jo secretly hopes that Professor Bear will come for her, which he does, and the duo gets married a year later. Amy and Laurie have a daughter named Beth, who remains sick. Jo inherits Aunt March's house, Plumfield, and turns it into a boarding school for boys. The March family is reunited and each sister is thankful for God's blessings. The novel ends with the family reunited on a happy note. The main role of women in 19th-century America was to be good housewives. They were supposed to cook, clean, and tend to the children. They were also supposed to teach their daughters how to be good housewives. Women would usually grow up, get married, and go off to live with their husbands. The role of women in Little Women is seen throughout the entire novel. Marmee is in charge of teaching her daughters everything that they need to know to become a good housewife. Marmee also has to cook, clean, and tend to her 4 daughters. Along with the role that Marmee plays as a typical woman in the 19th century, her daughters contribute to the role of women as well. By the end of the novel, all the living daughters get married and go to live with their husbands, becoming housewives in their new homes. Work is central to the lives of the members of the March family, and it's part of the social experiment at the heart of Little Women. Are women happiest when they work where they've always traditionally worked, in the home? Are women who are forced, or who select, to find work outside of the home less happy than women whose husbands serve as the breadwinners? These questions and more are addressed through the various work experiences of the March sisters. Meg is a governess, Jo tends to crotchety Aunt March, etc. The book pushes forward the idea that a woman's usefulness extends beyond the realm of hearth and home, and this is most evident when Jo goes on to create a name for herself as an author. Social class is also at stake in Little Women. Prior to Mr. March's departure, the March family is plunged into poverty due to shadowy circumstances. Throughout Little Women, the notion that poverty is valuable, and that material wealth, on the other hand, often leads to moral decay, is returned to again and again. Wealth is certainly a most desirable thing, Alcott writes, but poverty has its sunny side, and one of the sweet uses of adversity is the genuine satisfaction which comes from the hearty work of head or hand. The notion, right or wrong, that the lower classes possess a kind of nobility and virtue that the upper classes lack is levied again and again in Little Women. In Little Women, love is everywhere. Throughout the novel we see the love that all of the characters have for each other. We see a lot of love among the March family. The family shares a lot of love for each other as well as for friends. In the end of the novel, all of the March daughters end up falling in love and getting married. The March daughters also share a lot of love for each other, and they are very close to each other. You really get a sense of how much the March family loves each other when Jo talks about not wanting to get married, because she fears that her family will be separated and she won't be as close to her sisters anymore. Not only is there love between characters in the novel, but there is also love for the country and love for God. Love for the country is mostly seen by Mr. March, who leaves home to go fight in the Civil War. Love for God is seen through multiple characters, especially the March family, who are very religious and have a strong love for God. Love is a prominent theme throughout the novel. Little Women is what is termed as a classic, and for good reason. It has themes in it that every generation can relate to. It is about loyalty, steadfastness, courage, all good qualities which are needed for civilizations to survive. Finally, it is about girls who grow up to be young women, and about life endowing them with the qualities they will need for the work they will do, the wives they will be and the mothers they will become. The book contains all the dramas of life which an individual experiences growing up, being part of a family, forming a life of one's own, grief, loss, love,